Garrett Cole kissed the faded blue ribbon and whispered his daughter's name one last time. 3 years since he buried her. 3 years of silence, whiskey, and waiting to die. Then a bleeding woman crawled through his door, begging him to let her go. He should have listened, because now 400 warriors surrounded his cabin with arrows drawn, and the woman he saved sat among them, her eyes cold as a stranger's. Want to know how one act of mercy became a death sentence? Subscribe now, stay until the end, and drop your city in the comments. Let me see how far this story travels. The ribbon was all he had left of her. Garrett Cole sat in the dark, turning the pale blue fabric between his fingers. 3 years of handling it had worn the edges soft. 3 years of pressing it to his lips every night before the whiskey dragged him under. "Happy birthday, baby girl," he whispered. Sarah would have been 11 today. She'd be losing her front teeth begging for a pony, driving her mama crazy with questions about everything under the sun. But Sarah was bones in the ground, and so was Elizabeth. And Garrett was just a man too stubborn to follow them. The bottle on the table caught the last light from the dying fire, half empty. He'd finish it tonight, same as every night. Pass out on the cot. Wake up disappointed he was still breathing. That was the routine. That was all he had. The wind outside screamed like something dying. November in the high country was a killer snow piling against the cabin walls, cold seeping through every crack. Garrett didn't bother feeding the fire. Let it go out. Let everything go out. Then he heard it. A thump against the door. Weak. Almost nothing. His hand found the rifle before his mind caught up. 3 years alone had sharpened his instincts to a razor's edge. Nobody came to this valley. Nobody knew he existed. Another thump. Weaker. Who's there? Nothing but wind. Garrett crossed to the door, rifle up, finger on the trigger. Could be a drifter. Could be outlaws. Could be some fool who got lost in the storm and stumbled onto his land. Didn't matter. Whoever it was, they'd picked the wrong cabin. He yanked the door open. The woman fell into his arms. She collapsed forward, her weight catching him off guard, her blood soaking into his shirt before he could react. Black hair matted with ice. Buckskin dress torn and dark with crimson. She was shaking so hard her bones rattled. "Please," her voice was barely a breath. "Let me die here. Don't send me back." Garrett stared down at her. Apache from the beadwork. Young, maybe 30. Her face might have been beautiful if it wasn't gray with blood loss. His arms tightened around her without permission. "Who did this to you?" "Doesn't matter." Her eyes found his dark deep, already surrendering. "I'm done running. Just don't make me die alone in the snow. That's all I'm asking, mister. Just don't make me die alone." Something in her voice cracked him open. He knew that sound, that bone-deep exhaustion. That moment when fighting to live became too heavy to carry. He'd felt it every day for 3 years. Ah, hell. He kicked the door shut and carried her to the cot by the fireplace. She weighed nothing light as kindling her body burning with fever even as she shivered. "You're a fool," he muttered, laying her down. "Should have kept riding. Should have found someone else's door." There wasn't anyone else. Her lips curved almost a smile. "Believe me, I looked." Garrett grabbed a blanket and threw it over her. His hands were already moving to her wound, peeling back the torn buckskin. What he saw made his stomach drop. Arrow. Broke the shaft off, head still in there. She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "Leave it. I'm dead anyway. Just stay with me. Talk to me. Tell me something that ain't about dying." "I ain't much for talking." "Then just be here." Her grip loosened. "Please." Garrett looked at the wound, looked at her face, looked at the rifle leaning against the wall. He should walk away. Give her water, build up the fire, let nature take its course. He didn't owe this woman anything, didn't know her, didn't want to know her. But she'd said please. And she'd said alone. And somewhere in the dark corners of his memory, He heard Elizabeth's voice, thin and fading on her last night alive. "Promise me you'll keep living, Garrett. Promise me you won't let the darkness win." He'd broken that promise 1,000 times. "What's your name?" He was already reaching for his knife, already moving to the fire to heat the blade. "Morningstar." Her eyes tracked his movements. "My mother called me Sarah, after herself." Garrett's hand froze. Sarah. The same name. He closed his eyes, fighting the wave of memory. Little Sarah running through the wheat field. Little Sarah laughing at her mama's jokes. Little Sarah's hand going cold in his while he begged God for one more miracle. "Mr. Morningstar's voice pulled him back. "You all right?" "No." He turned to face her, the heated knife in his hand. "But neither are you. I'm gonna cut that arrowhead out. It's gonna hurt worse than anything you ever felt. Already hurts worse than anything I ever felt. It's gonna hurt more." She held his gaze. No fear. Just that same tired acceptance. "Do it." He grabbed a strip of leather and held it to her lips. "Bite down. Try not to scream. Sound carries out here." She took the leather between her teeth and nodded once. Garrett didn't count down. Didn't warn her. The knife went in fast, his fingers following, searching through torn muscle for the stone buried in her flesh. She screamed through the leather, her back arching, her hands clawing at the blanket. "Hold still," he growled. "Almost got it." His fingers found the arrowhead. He gripped it, pulled, and it came free in a rush of blood. Morningstar went limp, unconscious from the pain. "Don't you die on me." He pressed a cloth against the wound, applying pressure with one hand while reaching for needle and thread with the other. "You hear me? You don't get to die in my cabin. I didn't give you permission." He worked for an hour, stitching, cleaning, packing the wound with herbs he'd learned from an old Crow medicine man years ago. By the time he finished, his hands were shaking and his shirt was soaked with her blood. She was still breathing, barely. Garrett built up the fire and sat down across from her, watching, waiting. "Who the hell are you?" he murmured to the unconscious woman. "And what kind of trouble did you just bring to my door?" She didn't wake for 3 days. Garrett barely slept. Every few hours he checked her wound, forced water between her cracked lips, changed the blood-soaked bandages. Twice she burned so hot with fever he was certain she was dying. Twice she pulled through. On the second night he found himself talking to her. "My daughter's name was Sarah, too." He sat by the fire, the blue ribbon in his hands. "She was 8 when the fever took her. 8 years old. Still believed in fairy tales and happy endings." Morningstar didn't stir. Couldn't hear him. But somehow talking to her was easier than talking to the silence. "Elizabeth went first. My wife. She held on for 3 days, coughing blood, telling me to take care of our girl." His voice cracked. "Then Sarah got sick, and I watched her fade. Watched the light go out of her eyes one breath at a time." He pressed the ribbon to his forehead. "I buried them under the oak tree behind our house. Sold everything the next morning. Been running ever since." He laughed bitterly. "Ran all the way out here, middle of nowhere, thought I could hide from the grief. Thought if I stopped caring about anyone, I'd stop hurting." He looked at Morningstar's pale face. "Then you showed up, bleeding, begging, sharing my daughter's name like God's playing some sick joke on me." He shook his head. "What am I supposed to do with that?" She didn't answer. The fire crackled. The wind howled. Garrett sat there until dawn. On the third morning, her eyes opened. Garrett was cleaning his rifle when he heard her stir. He didn't look up. "You're awake." "Where?" Her voice was a rasp. "Cabin in the mountains, middle of nowhere. You've been out for 3 days." He heard her try to sit up, heard the sharp gasp of pain. "Don't move. You'll tear the stitches." "The arrow." "Gone. You're gonna have a nasty scar, but you'll live." He finally looked at her. "Assuming you don't do something stupid like trying to stand up." Morningstar stared at him. In the firelight, with color creeping back into her face, he could see how striking she was. High cheekbones, dark eyes that held too much pain for someone her age, a strength in her jaw that said she'd been fighting her whole life. "You saved me." "Don't remind me." "Why?" Garrett set down the rifle. "Because you asked not to die alone. Because I know what that feels like. Wanting to give up. Hoping someone will let you." She was quiet. Then, "You've wanted to die. Every day for 3 years." He didn't know why he was telling her this. Maybe because she was still a stranger. Maybe because she'd already seen him at his worst. "Lost my wife and daughter. Been running from their ghosts ever since." "Running don't work." Her voice was soft. "I've been running too. My whole life. Never gets you anywhere but tired." "Yeah, well." He stood and walked to the window. "Tired's all I got left." The snow had stopped. The sky was clearing. And that meant, "Mister." Morningstar's voice tightened. "I need to tell you something. About who shot me. About why I was running." Garrett felt the familiar cold in his gut. The instinct that had kept him alive through the war, through years of wandering. Something bad was coming. "I'm listening." "My father is Chief Running Bear. He leads the largest band of Arapaho in this territory. 400 warriors. Maybe more." Garrett went still. "Your father's a chief. And I'm his only daughter." She forced herself to sit up, wincing. "He arranged a marriage for me, to a war chief named Iron Wolf. Said it would unite our bands, make us stronger against the white soldiers." "But you ran." "You don't understand." Her voice shook. "Iron Wolf, he ain't a man. He's a monster wearing a man's skin. His first wife, Quiet Dove, she tried to leave him. He caught her, broke both her legs with a rock so she couldn't run again." Morningstar's hands clenched the blanket. She froze to death that winter. Couldn't crawl to the fire to keep herself warm. And he watched. He sat there and watched her die. Garrett's jaw tightened. His second wife, Singing Bird, she gave him a daughter instead of a son. He drowned the baby in the river and beat Singing Bird so bad she lost her mind. She walks around camp now, talking to ghosts, and everyone pretends they don't see. "And your father knows all this?" "Everyone knows." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "But Iron Wolf has warriors, has power, and my father—" She shook her head. "My father cares more about alliances than his own blood." Garrett turned from the window. "So you ran." 3 of Iron Wolf's men chased me. I killed one." Something fierce flashed in her eyes. "Took his own knife and opened his throat. The other 2 shot me and left me for dead. They'll figure out soon enough I ain't dead. When my body don't turn up on the burial grounds, they'll come looking. Looking. Here. I'm sorry." Her voice broke. "I didn't know this cabin was here. I was just running, bleeding, trying to find somewhere to die in peace. I never meant to bring trouble to your door." Garrett should be angry. Should drag her outside, leave her for her people to find, wash his hands of this mess. That was the smart move. That was survival. But he kept seeing Sarah's face. His Sarah. Blonde curls and blue ribbon and that trusting smile. And here was another Sarah crying in his cabin, running from a man who drowned babies and broke women's legs. "How long?" he asked quietly. "Before they come?" "Now that the snow stopped, 2 days. Maybe 3. She wiped her tears. "You should leave. Take your horse and ride west. Don't look back. I won't tell them." "Stop." He turned to face her fully. "Just stop." "Mr. Garrett. My name's Garrett Cole." She blinked. "Garrett, you need to understand. My father won't just kill you. When he finds out you touched me, treated my wound, put your hands on my body, he'll consider it a violation of sacred law." A violation. Punishable by death. Her voice dropped. "Unless you can prove yourself worthy. There's a ritual, the proving. 3 tests, body, mind, heart. Pass all 3 and you're declared innocent. Honored even. And if I fail, you die. She held his gaze. But Garrett, no man has ever passed. Not in my father's time. Not ever. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind had finally gone quiet. The world felt like it was holding its breath. Garrett thought about the ribbon in his pocket. Thought about Elizabeth's voice begging him to keep living. Thought about 3 years of running, hiding, waiting to die. Maybe this was how it was supposed to end. Maybe this was the darkness finally catching up to him. Or maybe this was something else entirely. "Tell me about these tests," he said. Morningstar's eyes widened. "What?" "The proving. 3 tests. Tell me about them." "Garrett, you can't." "I've been waiting to die for 3 years." He walked to the cot and crouched beside her close enough to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "Maybe it's time I tried living instead, even if it kills me." She stared at him for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression. That tired acceptance began to crack, and underneath it he saw a flicker of something else. Hope. "The first test is endurance," she said slowly. "They'll tie you to a post under the sun. You stand until sunset. If you fall, you fail. And the second, judgment. They'll offer you something you want, water, food, rest. If you take it, you fail. You have to prove you think of others before yourself. And the third," Morningstar hesitated. "The third is different. It tests your heart, your truth. I don't know exactly what they'll ask, but—" She shook her head. "Men fail the third test, Garrett. Good men, strong men. They fail because they can't see past their own lies." Garrett was quiet for a moment. Then he stood. "Get some rest. Build up your strength." "For what?" He grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, watching the clear sky where storm clouds had been. "For teaching me everything you know about your father, about Iron Wolf, about these tests." He looked back at her. "I ain't dying in this cabin, and neither are you." Morningstar stared at him. Something in her face softened just for a moment before she caught herself. "You're either the bravest man I ever met," she said quietly, "or the craziest." "Maybe both." He almost smiled. It felt strange on his face. "Wouldn't be the first time." He turned back to the window. Somewhere out there, beyond the white peaks and frozen valleys, 400 warriors were preparing to hunt. They were coming for her. And when they arrived, they'd find him waiting. Garrett pressed his hand against his chest, feeling the ribbon beneath his shirt. For the first time in 3 years, he didn't wish he was dead. He had a reason to live, even if that reason might be the thing that killed him. Morningstar slept through the rest of that day, her body fighting to heal what the arrow had torn apart. Garrett sat by the window rifle across his lap, watching the tree line for movement that never came. But it would come. He knew that now. When she woke again near sunset, her eyes were clearer, sharper. She pushed herself up on one elbow and found him still at his post. "You've been sitting there all day." "Someone's got to keep watch." "They ain't coming yet." She winced as she shifted position. "My father don't move fast. He plans, gathers information, sends scouts before he sends warriors." Garrett turned to face her. "So we got time." "Some. Maybe 2 days, like I said." She studied him with those dark eyes. "You really mean to do this, face the proving?" "You got a better idea?" "Yeah, run. Take your horse and disappear into the mountains. My father's got no quarrel with a man he can't find. And leave you here." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. "I ain't your responsibility, Garrett Cole. We met 2 days ago. You don't owe me nothing." He stood and walked to the fireplace, feeding it a log he didn't need. Anything to keep his hands busy while he said what needed saying. 3 years ago, I watched my daughter die, held her hand while the fever burned her up from the inside. I promised her mama I'd keep living, promised I'd find a way to be happy again." He turned to face Morningstar. "I've been breaking that promise every day since, drinking myself stupid, waiting for death to come find me. And now death's coming, but it ain't coming for me to surrender. He met her eyes. It's coming for me to fight. And maybe that's the only way I can keep my promise. Morningstar was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. All right. If you're set on this path, I'll teach you what I know. But Garrett, her voice hardened. You need to understand something. My father ain't evil. He's hard because the world made him hard. He's watched his people get pushed off their land, watched children starve, watched soldiers burn villages for sport. Everything he does to keep our people alive. Including marrying you off to a monster. Her jaw tightened. Iron Wolf brings 200 warriors, 200 fighters who could protect our women and children when the soldiers come again. In my father's mind, one daughter's suffering is a fair trade for 200 lives. That's a hell of a calculation. That's survival. She sat up, fully ignoring the pain that crossed her face. So when you face him, don't expect mercy. Don't expect fairness. Expect a man who's been fighting his whole life and ain't got nothing left but his people and his pride. Garrett absorbed this. What about you? What do you expect? Me. She laughed bitterly. I stopped expecting anything a long time ago. But if you're asking what I want... She paused, and for a moment the hardness in her eyes softened. I want to be seen, not as a chief's daughter, not as a prize to be traded. Just seen, for who I am. And who are you? The question hung between them. Morningstar looked away first. Ask me again if you survive the proving. Garrett let the silence settle. Then he grabbed a chair and pulled it close to her cot. Tell me about the first test. Endurance. Everything you know. Morningstar took a breath. They'll tie your hands behind a post. High so your shoulders carry all the weight. The sun will beat down from directly overhead when it starts. You'll stand there until it touches the western horizon. How long? 6 hours, maybe 7. Depends on the time of year. And if I fall? You fail, and failure means death. She leaned forward. But that ain't the real danger, Garrett. The real danger is your mind. 6 hours is a long time when you're in pain. Your thoughts will turn against you. Every regret, every failure, every person you ever let down, they'll come for you. And if you let them win, your body will follow. Sounds like you've seen this before. Twice. Her voice went flat. The first man lasted 4 hours. Big fella. Stronger than you. His legs gave out when he started crying for his mother. And the second man lasted 5.5. He was doing fine until he saw his wife in the crowd. She was crying. He tried to call out to her, lost his focus, and his knees buckled. Morningstar shook her head. My father's warriors don't respect weakness. When that man fell, they saw everything they needed to see. Garrett processed this. So I can't think about the past. Can't think about anyone watching. What can I think about? The next breath. Morningstar's eyes locked onto his. That's it. Nothing else exists. Not the pain, not the heat, not the time. Just the next breath. Take it. Then take another. Keep taking them until the sun goes down. The next breath, Garrett repeated. You'll want to count. Don't. Numbers become a trap. You'll want to look at the horizon. Don't. The sun moves too slow. You'll want to close your eyes. Don't. They'll think you're giving up. What about water food? Nothing. From the moment they tie you up until the moment the sun sets, you get nothing. She paused. But here's the thing, you ain't supposed to need anything. The proving ain't about suffering. It's about showing you can endure what life throws at you without complaint. My father's people have survived for generations by being stronger than their circumstances. The first test proves you belong among them. Garrett sat back, running through the logistics in his mind. 6 or 7 hours. No water. Arms tied high. pain in the shoulders, the back, the legs, and a mind full of ghosts trying to drag him down. "I can do it," he said quietly. "Maybe." Morningstar's voice carried no judgment. "But the first test is the easy one. You said the second test is judgment. They offer me something I want, and I have to refuse it." "It's more than that." She shifted, trying to find a comfortable position. "The second test reveals who you truly are when you're desperate. After 6 hours in the sun, they'll offer you water. Cool, clear water in a clay vessel. Every instinct in your body will scream at you to take it. But I don't. Because it's a trick." "It ain't a trick." Morningstar's voice sharpened. "That's where men go wrong. They think they're supposed to refuse because it's a test. But my father don't want people who follow rules blindly. He wants people who understand why the rules exist." Garrett frowned. "I don't follow. The water ain't meant for you. It's meant for the warriors who rode all day to bring you to the proving grounds. It's meant for the elders who stood in the sun to watch you. It's meant for everyone, except yourself." She held his gaze. "If you refuse the water because you know it's a test, you fail. If you refuse the water because you genuinely care more about others than yourself, that's when you pass." "How can they tell the difference?" "They can tell." Something dark crossed her face. "My father's been reading men his whole life. He knows the difference between a man who's performing selflessness and a man who feels it in his bones. You can't fake your way through the second test, Garrett. You have to mean it." The weight of her words settled over him. This wasn't just about physical endurance or clever strategy. This was about the core of who he was. "What if I ain't that man?" he asked quietly. "What if I spent 3 years thinking about nobody but myself and my own pain?" Morningstar studied him for a long moment. The man who spent 3 years thinking only about himself wouldn't have carried a bleeding stranger into his cabin, wouldn't have dug an arrowhead out of her body, wouldn't have sat up 3 nights making sure she didn't die. That was different. Was it? She leaned forward. "Why did you save me, Garrett, really? Not the pretty answer, the real one." He didn't respond immediately. The truth was complicated, tangled up with guilt and grief, and things he didn't have words for. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "I saw you lying there begging not to die alone, and I just couldn't leave you. Something in me wouldn't let me walk away." "That's something—" Morningstar's voice softened. "That's what my father's looking for. That instinct that puts another person's life above your own comfort. You've got it, Garrett. You just buried it under 3 years of whiskey and self-pity." The words stung, but not unfairly. "What about the third test?" he asked. "The one you said men fail even when they're good and strong." Morningstar's expression changed. The openness that had crept in over the past few minutes retreated, replaced by something guarded. "The third test is different for every man. My father chooses it based on what he sees in the first 2. He finds your weakness, the thing you're most ashamed of, the lie you tell yourself to keep going, and he makes you face it in front of everyone." "How?" "I don't know exactly. I've only seen one man reach the third test, and he—" She stopped, her voice catching. "He what?" "He was my brother." The words came out barely above a whisper. "Makya. He was trying to prove himself worthy to lead after my father. Our father made him choose between his pride and his people. Makya chose wrong. What happened to him? He's dead." Morningstar's eyes had gone distant. He failed the third test, and the shame of it broke him. He rode out into a winter storm that night and never came back. We found his body 3 days later, frozen solid, still facing east, like he was trying to run from what he'd done. Garrett felt the weight of that story settle into his chest. This wasn't a game. This wasn't some ritual he could power through with grit and determination. This was life and death with consequences that reached beyond the proving grounds. "Your father killed his own son." "No. The proving killed him. The failure." Morning Star finally met his eyes again. That's what I've been trying to tell you, Garrett. It ain't about whether you're strong enough to survive. It's about whether you can face the truth of who you are and keep standing anyway. And you think I can do that? She was quiet for a long moment. I think you've already been facing the truth for 3 years. You've just been running from it instead of standing in it. Before Garrett could respond, a sound cut through the stillness. Hoofbeats. Distant but unmistakable. Morning Star's face went pale. They're here. Already. Something's wrong. Garrett grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. Through the gap in the shutters, he counted shapes emerging from the tree line. Not hundreds. Not even dozens. 3 riders. It's a scouting party, Morning Star said from behind him, her voice tight. They must have found my trail faster than I thought. Can you ride? Not well, not fast. Then stay inside. He checked the rifle's chamber. I'll handle this. Garrett, wait. Her hand caught his arm. If they see you with a weapon, they'll assume hostility. They'll ride back and tell my father you're a threat. He'll bring the whole war party and they won't bother with the proving. They'll just kill you. So what do you want me to do? Invite them in for coffee. Go out there unarmed. Speak to them. Tell them what happened, that you found a wounded woman and saved her life. Don't mention my name. Don't tell them who I am. Let them think I'm just some traveler you helped. Will they believe that? Probably not. But it'll buy us time while they ride back to verify. Her grip tightened. Whatever you do, don't let them inside this cabin. If they see me, everything changes. Garrett looked down at her hand on his arm, small but strong, desperate. Stay quiet, he said, and stay hidden. He set the rifle against the wall and walked to the door. The 3 riders had stopped 50 yards from the cabin. They sat motionless on their horses, watching. Waiting. Their faces were painted with red and black streaks, war paint, though they hadn't come for war. Not yet. Garrett stepped off the porch with his hands visible, palms out. Morning, gentlemen. The lead rider was young, maybe early 20s, with the lean build of someone who'd spent his whole life on horseback. He studied Garrett with flat, suspicious eyes. You live here alone? That's right. We're tracking a woman, Apache, young. She would have come through here 2, maybe 3 days ago. Garrett's heart pounded, but his face stayed calm. I ain't seen any women, just snow and wind for the past week. The young warrior exchanged a glance with his companions. Something passed between them, doubt maybe, or suspicion. Your cabin. The lead rider nodded toward the structure. We'll need to search it. Afraid I can't allow that. All 3 warriors tensed. The 2 in the back reached for weapons that hung at their sides. You refuse. I don't know you, don't know your intentions. A man's home is his own out here, and I ain't in the habit of opening my door to strangers with war paint on their faces. Garrett kept his voice level, almost friendly. You're welcome to water your horses at the creek. Rest a spell before you ride on. But the cabin stays closed. The lead rider's jaw tightened. For a moment, Garrett was certain he'd made a fatal mistake. That the warrior would charge or signal the others to attack, or, you speak bold for a man alone. I've got nothing to lose. Makes a man bold. Another long silence. The warrior's horse stamped impatiently, but its rider sat perfectly still. We'll water the horses, he finally said. Then we ride. But hear me, white man, if we find out you're lying, if you're hiding the woman we seek, there won't be a conversation next time. Only arrows. Understood. The 3 riders turned and moved toward the creek behind the cabin. Garrett stood motionless, watching them until they disappeared from view. Then he walked back inside, closing the door softly behind him. Morning Star was pressed against the far wall, barely breathing. They're gone. For now, but they ain't convinced. Garrett moved to the window, checking the angle to make sure the warriors couldn't see inside. We bought maybe a day, 2 if we're lucky. That's not enough time. Morning Star's voice shook. I need at least a week before I can ride properly. And even then, you ain't riding anywhere. Garrett turned to face her. I meant what I said. We stand and face this. Garrett. No. He crossed to her, crouching so their eyes were level. Listen to me. Those men. They're gonna ride back and tell your father exactly where you are. By tomorrow night, there'll be 400 warriors surrounding this cabin. That's happening no matter what we do. So what's your plan? Same plan as before. When they come, I walk out. I tell your father the truth that I found his daughter wounded and saved her life. I demand the proving. And if he refuses, then I die on my feet instead of running. He took her hand, surprising them both. But I ain't gonna fail, Morning Star. Not the first test, not the second, not the third, because now I got something I ain't had in 3 years. What's that? Someone worth fighting for. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was ready to examine. Morning Star looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. You barely know me. I know you ran from a monster because you'd rather die free than live in chains. I know you killed a man who was trying to drag you back to hell. I know you crawled through a blizzard with an arrow in your side rather than give up. He squeezed her hand gently. That's enough. That's more than enough. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back with the practiced discipline of someone who'd learned long ago not to show weakness. My father's gonna make this hard, harder than anything you've ever faced. I know. And Iron Wolf, if he's there, he'll try to kill you before the proving even starts. He'll claim rights to me as his promised bride and demand your head as punishment for touching me. Then I'll deal with Iron Wolf too. How he's the strongest warrior in my father's alliance. He's killed more men than you've probably met. Garrett's jaw set. I survived 4 years of war. Watched boys younger than those scouts die screaming in the mud at Antietam. I've killed men with rifles, pistols, bayonets, and my bare hands when I had to. He met her eyes. Iron Wolf might be a monster, but he ain't the only one who knows how to be dangerous. Something shifted in Morning Star's expression. A recalculation. She was seeing him differently now, not just as the lonely man who'd saved her life, but as something harder. Something that had survived the same kind of violence she'd fled from. There's something else you should know, she said quietly. About Iron Wolf. About why my father tolerates him despite what he does to women. Tell me. 5 winters ago, our band was starving. The buffalo had moved south and the snow came early. Children were dying. Elders were dying. My father was ready to surrender to the soldiers just to get his people fed. Her voice went distant, caught in the memory. Iron Wolf came from the north with 200 warriors and 3 months of supplies. He'd raided a cavalry supply train, killed every soldier, took everything. He shared it all with our band, asked for nothing in return. Saved us when no one else would. So your father owes him? More than owes. In our way, a debt like that can never be fully repaid. Iron Wolf could ask for anything, land, horses, weapons, and my father would give it. Her voice hardened. So when he asked for me, my father couldn't refuse, not without breaking the sacred law of reciprocity. Garrett absorbed this. The situation was more complicated than he'd realized. This wasn't just about one woman fleeing an abusive marriage. It was about tribal politics, survival debts, and sacred obligations that stretched back years. Does Iron Wolf know where you are? He will soon. Those scouts will tell their leader, and their leader will tell my father, and Iron Wolf has spies in my father's camp. By tomorrow, everyone will know. She gripped his hand harder. Garrett, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Ask. If you face the proving and pass, if my father declares you worthy, what then? What happens to me? It was a question he hadn't considered. He'd been so focused on survival that he hadn't thought about what came after. I don't know, he admitted. What usually happens, usually the man who passes becomes part of the tribe, protected by our laws, free to come and go as he pleases. She paused. But I'd still be promised to Iron Wolf. Passing the proving wouldn't change that. So even if I survive, you still have to marry him. Unless, she trailed off. Unless what? Morning Star looked away. There's another way. An older law. If a man who has proven himself worthy claims a woman as his own, offers to marry her himself, he can override a previous arrangement. It's rarely used, but it exists. Garrett went very still. You're saying I'd have to marry you? I'm saying it's the only way to free me from Iron Wolf permanently. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm not asking you to do it. I'm just telling you the truth, so you understand what's at stake. The cabin felt suddenly smaller, the fire too warm. Garrett released her hand and stood walking to the window to put distance between them. Marry her. A woman he'd known for 3 days. A woman from a different world, a different culture, a different everything. But also a woman who shared his daughter's name. A woman who'd looked death in the eye and chosen to keep fighting. A woman who made him feel for the first time in 3 years like maybe there was something worth living for. I ain't making any promises, he said finally, his back still turned. But I ain't ruling anything out either. Let me survive the proving first, then we'll figure out the rest. That's fair. Her voice was steady, controlled. Thank you for being honest. Morning Star. Yes. He turned to face her. If I do this, if I pass the tests and claim you, I need you to understand something. I ain't doing it to own you. I ain't doing it to replace what I lost. I'm doing it because you deserve better than Iron Wolf, and if marrying me is the only way to give you that, then that's what I'll do. Something glistened in her eyes. Most men wouldn't even think to say that. I ain't most men. No. A small smile touched her lips. You really ain't. The moment stretched between them, fragile and new. Then a sound from outside shattered it, hoofbeats again, closer this time, moving fast. Garrett grabbed his rifle. Stay down. He moved to the window. Through the gap he counted the shapes. Not 3 this time. 30. They're back, he said grimly. And they brought friends. Morning Star pushed herself up, despite the pain. It's too soon. Something's wrong. The lead rider, different from before, older with gray streaking his braids, raised a hand. The column behind him stopped in perfect formation. Garrett Cole. The voice carried across the clearing like a thunderclap. Garrett's blood went cold. They knew his name. Somehow they already knew who he was. Garrett Cole, Chief Running Bear demands your presence. Come out now unarmed, or we will burn your cabin to the ground with you inside. Morning Star grabbed his arm. Don't go. They'll kill you before you can. If I don't go, they'll kill us both. He set down the rifle. Stay hidden. Whatever happens, stay hidden until you're strong enough to run. Garrett. I ain't saying goodbye. He looked back at her, and for one moment all the walls between them crumbled. I'm saying I'll see you on the other side. Then he walked to the door and stepped into the light. The warriors surrounded him within seconds, rough hands forcing him to his knees in the snow. He didn't fight, didn't resist, just kept his eyes fixed on the gray-haired leader who dismounted and walked toward him with the measured pace of a man who'd ordered countless executions. You are Garrett Cole, the man who touched Chief Running Bear's daughter. I saved her life. You touched what belongs to another. The leader's face was carved from stone. That is a violation of sacred law. Then let me face the proving. Let me prove I acted with honor. The leader stared at him for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise maybe that a white man knew their customs. You know of the proving. I know I have the right to demand it. I know your law says you can't refuse. Silence stretched across the clearing. The warriors shifted uneasily, looking to their leader for guidance. Finally, the gray-haired man nodded. You will have your proving. Chief Running Bear will judge you himself. He gestured to the warriors. Bind his hands. We ride now. They pulled Garrett to his feet, lashing his wrists behind his back with leather cords that bit into his skin. Someone brought a horse, and they threw him onto its back like a sack of grain. As they rode out of the clearing, Garrett twisted to look back at the cabin. Through the small window, he caught a glimpse of a pale face watching him go. Morning Star. He held her gaze until the trees swallowed the cabin from view. Then he turned forward toward whatever waited ahead. The proving was coming, and one way or another, everything was about to change. They rode for hours deeper into territory Garrett had never seen. The warriors didn't speak to him, barely looked at him. He was cargo now, a problem to be delivered and dealt with. When they finally stopped, night had fallen. A massive camp spread across a frozen valley, hundreds of fires twinkling like fallen stars. Garrett counted the shelters more than he could number. This wasn't just a war party. This was an entire nation. They dragged him from the horse and forced him to walk through the camp. Faces watched from every direction. Men, women, children, elders. Some curious, some hostile, all silent. At the center of the camp stood a lodge larger than the others, decorated with symbols Garrett didn't recognize. The warriors pushed him through the entrance flap and shoved him to his knees. The man sitting across the fire was old, but not frail. His face bore the lines of 70 winters, but his eyes burned with an intensity that made Garrett's breath catch. He wore a single eagle feather in his gray hair, and his hands resting on his knees were scarred from decades of war. Chief Running Bear, Morning Star's father. So, the chief's voice was deep resonant, carrying the weight of absolute authority. You are the man who touched my daughter. I saved your daughter's life. That remains to be seen. The chief leaned forward, studying Garrett like a hawk studying a mouse. She was promised to Iron Wolf, a sacred arrangement, and now she is missing, hidden away while you sit here claiming innocence. She came to me wounded, dying. I did what any decent man would do. A decent man would have returned her to her people. A decent man wouldn't send her back to a monster who drowns babies and breaks women's legs. The words hung in the air like a challenge. The warriors around the lodge went rigid, hands moving toward weapons. But Chief Running Bear didn't flinch. If anything, a flicker of something, respect maybe, or just interest, crossed his weathered face. You speak boldly for a man on his knees. I ain't got nothing to lose. Makes a man bold. So my warriors tell me. The chief's eyes narrowed. You demanded the proving. You know what that means. 3 tests. Body, mind, heart. I pass, I'm declared worthy. I fail, I die. And you believe you can succeed where every man before you has failed. I believe I have to try. Chief Running Bear was silent for a long moment. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows across the lodge walls. My daughter, he said finally. You know where she is. Yes. You will tell me. No. The warriors surged forward, but the chief raised a hand, stopping them. You refuse a direct order from a chief. I refuse to hand her over to Iron Wolf. That's not the same thing. Garrett met the old man's eyes. You want to find her, you'll have to find her yourself. But I'm guessing you already know where she is. You just wanted to see if I'd betray her. Something shifted in the chief's expression. The hostility didn't disappear, but it softened, just slightly. You're either very brave or very stupid. Been told I'm both. The proving begins at dawn. Chief Running Bear rose, and despite his age, his presence filled the lodge. You will face the first test when the sun rises. If you survive, the second test follows. If you survive that, you will face me in the third test personally. I understand. I wonder if you do. The chief moved toward the exit, then paused. My daughter. Is she well? The question caught Garrett off guard. For the first time, he heard something other than authority in the old man's voice. A father's concern. She's healing. The wound was bad, but she's strong. Chief Running Bear nodded once his back still turned. She always was, stronger than her brother, stronger than most of my warriors. He glanced back over his shoulder. I hope for both your sakes that you are strong enough too. Then he was gone, leaving Garrett alone with the fire and the guards who would watch him through the night. Dawn was coming, and with it the first test. Garrett closed his eyes and thought about Morningstar's voice. The next breath. That's all that matters, just the next breath. He took one, then another, and waited for the sun to rise. They came for him before the sun broke the horizon. Two warriors dragged Garrett from the lodge where he'd spent the night, his wrists still bound his body, stiff from the cold. He hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Morningstar's face, heard her voice telling him about the men who'd failed before him. The next breath. That's all that matters. The camp had transformed overnight. Hundreds of people lined a path that led to the center of the valley, where a single wooden post stood driven deep into the frozen earth. Warriors, women, children, elders, they'd all come to watch, to witness, to see him fail. Garrett walked with his head high, refusing to stumble even when the warriors shoved him forward. He could feel their eyes on him, hundreds of gazes tracking his every step. Some curious, some hostile, all waiting. At the end of the path stood Chief Running Bear, flanked by his senior warriors, and beside them, a figure that made Garrett's blood run cold. Iron Wolf. He was massive, taller than any man Garrett had ever seen, with shoulders that could block out the sun. His face was painted in black and red, his bare chest crisscrossed with scars that told stories of countless battles. But it was his eyes that made Garrett's stomach drop. Dead eyes, empty eyes. The eyes of a man who'd long ago lost whatever made him human. So this is the white man who thinks he can pass the proving. Iron Wolf's voice was a rumble like thunder trapped underground. He looks like he'd break in the first hour. That's for the proving to decide. Chief Running Bear's voice carried no emotion. Not you. Iron Wolf's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. His eyes, though, stayed fixed on Garrett with the promise of violence to come. The warriors forced Garrett to his knees before the chief. Running Bear looked down at him with that same unreadable expression from the night before. Garrett Cole, you have demanded the proving. You understand what this means. I do. You understand that if you fail any test you die. I do. And you still wish to proceed. Garrett met the old man's eyes. I do. Chief Running Bear nodded slowly. Then let it begin. The warriors hauled Garrett to his feet and marched him to the post. They cut the bindings on his wrists, and for one moment he was free. Then they seized his arms and yanked them behind the post, tying them high, so high his shoulders screamed in protest immediately. The first test is endurance, Running Bear announced, his voice carrying across the crowd. He will stand until the sun touches the western mountains. If he falls, he fails. If he calls out for mercy, he fails. If he shows weakness, he fails. The crowd murmured. Somewhere in the back, Garrett heard Iron Wolf laugh. He won't last until noon. The sun crested the horizon, and the test began. The first hour wasn't bad. Garrett focused on his breathing, just like Morningstar had told him. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the next breath. Nothing else. His shoulders burned, but he'd felt worse. His legs ached, but they held. The cold morning air kept him alert, kept the pain from overwhelming his senses. You can do this, he told himself, one breath at a time. The second hour brought the heat. The sun climbed higher, and whatever mercy the morning had offered vanished. Sweat broke out across his forehead, his back soaking into his shirt. His mouth went dry. His tongue felt thick and swollen. Don't think about water. Don't think about time. Just breathe. Around him, the crowd had settled into silence. They watched him the way they might watch an animal in a trap, curious, detached, waiting to see how he'd die. But Garrett wasn't dying. Not yet. The third hour brought the memories. They came unbidden, slipping past his defenses like thieves in the night. Sarah's laugh. Elizabeth's smile. The smell of the wheat field on that last summer morning before everything went wrong. No, not now. He pushed them away, but they kept coming. His daughter's small hand in his, going cold, while he begged God for a miracle. His wife's last breath rattling in her chest like something broken. "You promised me, Garrett. You promised you'd keep living." "I am living," he whispered through cracked lips. "I'm trying." A warrior near the front of the crowd leaned toward his companion. He's talking to himself. He's breaking. Garrett heard them. Heard the satisfaction in their voices. They wanted him to fail. They expected him to fail. He locked his knees and kept breathing. The fourth hour brought the shaking. His legs trembled uncontrollably, muscles screaming for relief. His arms had gone numb hours ago, but now the numbness was spreading down his back through his chest into his gut. His body was shutting down. Morning Star's voice echoed in his memory. "Your thoughts will turn against you. Every regret, every failure, every person you ever let down, they'll come for you." She was right. They were coming. The battlefield at Antietam. The boy he'd tried to save gut-shot and screaming for his mother. The moment Garrett's hands had slipped covered in blood, and the boy had died staring up at him with accusing eyes. "You couldn't save me." "I tried," Garrett breathed. "You failed." "I know." And then there was another memory. Fresher. Sharper. Morning Star lying on his cabin floor, blood pooling beneath her, begging him to let her die. What if he'd listened? What if he'd walked away like the smart part of him had wanted? She'd be dead. And he'd be alone in his cabin drinking himself stupid, waiting for an end that never came. But he hadn't walked away. He'd saved her. And now he was here tied to a post under a burning sun fighting for the right to keep saving her. That's worth something, he thought. That has to be worth something. The fifth hour broke him. His left leg gave out first, just buckled like someone had cut the strings holding it up. He caught himself, shifted his weight to the right leg, but the damage was done. The crowd saw it. The warriors saw it. Iron Wolf saw it. "He's falling," someone shouted. "He's going to fail. No, not yet. Not like this." Garrett gritted his teeth and forced his left leg to straighten. The pain was blinding white-hot agony shooting from his knee to his hip, but he locked the joint and stayed upright. The crowd went silent. Iron Wolf's smile disappeared. Chief Running Bear leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. "He's still standing," one of the elders murmured. "How is he still standing?" "Because I've got nothing left to lose." Garrett thought, "Because dying on my feet is better than living on my knees. Because somewhere out there, a woman who shares my daughter's name is counting on me to survive." He kept breathing. The sixth hour brought hallucinations. He saw Elizabeth standing at the edge of the crowd watching him with sad eyes. He saw Sarah beside her holding her mother's hand, the blue ribbon in her hair, bright as the summer sky. "Daddy," Sarah said, "you can rest now. It's okay to rest." Tears streamed down Garrett's face. "Not yet, baby girl. Daddy's got work to do." "You're hurting." "I know." "You don't have to hurt anymore." "Yes, I do." He held her gaze even though he knew she wasn't real. "I hurt for the same reason I lived. Because giving up would mean I never loved you at all. And I did love you, Sarah. I loved you more than anything in this world." The vision flickered, faded. But not before Sarah smiled. "I know, Daddy. I always knew." And then she was gone, and Garrett was alone with the pain and the sun and the 100 watching eyes. But something had changed. The weight he'd been carrying for 3 years. The guilt, the grief, the endless question of why he'd survived when they hadn't, it felt lighter. Not gone, but manageable. Like he'd finally found a way to carry it without being crushed. He straightened his spine, lifted his head, looked directly at the sun that had been trying to kill him for 6 hours. "Come on," he thought. "Is that all you've got?" The seventh hour passed in a blur of pain and determination. Garrett stopped feeling his body entirely. Stopped thinking about time. Stopped caring about the crowd or Iron Wolf or anything except the next breath, and the next, and the next. And then finally someone shouted, "The shadow! It's touching the mountains!" Garrett blinked, forcing his vision to focus. The sun had dropped below the peaks to the west, casting long shadows across the valley. The shadow of the mountains was creeping toward him, inch by inch, bringing with it the promise of relief. He'd made it. The crowd erupted. Not in celebration, they were too stunned for that, but in noise. Shouting, arguing warriors pointing at him like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Chief Running Bear rose from his seat and walked toward the post. His face was still unreadable, but there was something new in his eyes. Something that looked almost like respect. "Cut him down!" Warriors rushed forward with knives. The ropes fell away, and Garrett's arms dropped to his sides. The sudden release was agony, blood rushing back into his shoulders, muscles screaming in protest. But he didn't fall. He would not fall. "The first test is complete." Running Bear's voice carried across the now silent crowd. "He has passed." The murmuring started again. This time Garrett heard surprise in it. Confusion. A few voices, very few, that sounded almost impressed. But Iron Wolf's voice cut through all of them. "One test means nothing. He'll fail the second. And when he does, I claim his head." Running Bear turned to face the war chief. "You forget yourself. The proving is sacred. You will not interfere." "I forget nothing." Iron Wolf stepped forward, his massive frame blocking out the firelight. "I remember that your daughter was promised to me. I remember that this white man touched what is mine. And I remember that when he fails, his life belongs to me." The tension in the crowd was suffocating. Warriors on both sides shifted uneasily, hands moving toward weapons. "He has not failed yet," Running Bear said quietly. "And until he does, he is under my protection." "Your protection." Iron Wolf spat the words like a curse. "We'll see how much that's worth when he's screaming for mercy in the second test." He turned and stalked away, his warriors falling in behind him. The crowd parted like water before a stone. Running Bear watched him go, then turned back to Garrett. "Can you walk?" Garrett's legs were shaking so badly he wasn't sure he could stand, let alone walk. But he nodded anyway. "Good. The second test begins now." They gave him nothing. No water, no food, no rest. Warriors flanked him as he stumbled through the camp, leading him to a fire circle where the elders had gathered. His body screamed for relief. 7 hours in the sun had left him dehydrated, exhausted, barely able to see straight. But the second test wouldn't wait, and neither would he. The elders parted as he approached, revealing a young woman kneeling beside the fire. She held a clay vessel in her hands, and even from 10 feet away, Garrett could hear the water inside it. Cool. Clear. Life itself in a container. His throat tightened. His tongue, swollen and cracked, pressed against the roof of his mouth. Every cell in his body cried out for what was in that vessel. "The second test is judgment," Running Bear announced. "He will be offered water. What he does with it will reveal who he truly is." The young woman rose and walked toward Garrett, holding out the vessel. Her eyes were sympathetic, almost pitying. "Drink," she said softly. "You've earned it." Garrett stared at the water. His hands trembled at his sides. He could smell it now, clean and cold, promising relief from the fire that had been burning inside him for hours. "Take it," his body screamed. "Take it and drink, and let the pain stop." But Morningstar's voice was louder. "The water ain't meant for you. It's meant for the warriors who rode all day, for the elders who stood in the sun to watch you, for everyone except yourself." He looked past the young woman to the crowd behind her. Warriors who had stood guard in the heat. Elders who had watched for 7 hours without shade. Children who had been silent and patient through the entire ordeal. They were thirsty too, All of them. No, Garrett said. The young woman blinked. What? I said no. He pushed the vessel back toward her. Give it to them. Silence fell over the crowd. The young woman stared at him, confusion written across her face. Give it to who? Everyone. Garrett's voice cracked, but he forced the words out. The warriors, the elders, the children. They've been out here all day too. They need it more than I do. The young woman looked to Chief Running Bear uncertain. The old chief's expression had shifted. The mask of authority had cracked just slightly, revealing something underneath. Surprise, and something deeper. You refuse the water, he said slowly, because you believe others deserve it more. I refuse it because I ain't the only one suffering. Garrett met his eyes. And a man who only thinks about himself ain't worth saving anyway. The silence stretched. Garrett could feel his heart pounding in his chest, could feel his legs threatening to give out at any moment. If he'd guessed wrong, if this wasn't the answer they wanted. Running Bear raised his hand. Give the water to the people, he commanded. Let everyone drink. The young woman bowed and carried the vessel into the crowd. Garrett watched as warriors and elders and children each took a sip, passing the vessel from hand to hand until it was empty. And when it was done, something had changed in the way they looked at him. The hostility was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Curiosity. Respect. Even a few nods of acknowledgement. The second test is complete, Running Bear announced. He has passed. This time the crowd's reaction was louder, more animated. Garrett heard arguments breaking out, some insisting he must have cheated somehow, others defending his choice. But through it all, one voice cut like a knife. 2 tests prove nothing. Iron Wolf pushed through the crowd, his massive frame parting bodies like a ship through waves. He stopped directly in front of Garrett, close enough that his breath hit Garrett's face. Any fool can stand in the sun. Any fool can refuse water. But the third test... His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. The third test breaks men. And when you break white man, I'll be there to watch. Looking forward to it, Garrett replied. Iron Wolf's hand shot out and grabbed Garrett's throat, lifting him off the ground. Warriors shouted, surging forward, but Iron Wolf didn't seem to notice. You think you're clever, he hissed. You think you can waltz in here, pass a few tests, and take what's mine. But I've killed better men than you. Stronger men. Men who begged for death before I gave it to them. Garrett's vision was going dark. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except hang there in Iron Wolf's grip. When the proving is done, Iron Wolf whispered, I'm going to find Morning Star. I'm going to drag her back by her hair, and I'm going to make her watch while I tear you apart piece by piece. He released his grip, and Garrett collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. Iron Wolf, Running Bear's voice cracked like a whip. You dare interrupt the proving. I dare what I please. Iron Wolf turned to face the chief, and for a moment it looked like violence was about to explode. Remember who saved your people, old man. Remember who kept your children from starving. Before you choose sides. The 2 men stared at each other. The entire camp held its breath. Then Iron Wolf turned and walked away. Garrett pushed himself to his knees, then to his feet. His throat burned where Iron Wolf had gripped it, but he forced himself to stand straight. The third test, he croaked. When does it begin? Running. Bear looked at him for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Now. The third test begins now. They led him to a smaller fire away from the crowd. Only the elders followed, forming a semicircle around the flames. Running Bear sat across from Garrett, his weathered face flickering in the firelight. The third test is different for every man, the chief said quietly. It reveals the truth of who you are, not who you want to be, not who you pretend to be, the truth. I understand. Do you... Running Bear leaned forward. I've watched men pass the first 2 tests with ease. Strong men, brave men. They failed the third because they couldn't face what lived inside them. What do I have to do? Running Bear reached into his robe and withdrew something small. He held it up to the firelight, and Garrett's heart stopped. A blue ribbon. Faded. Worn at the edges. Identical to the one Garrett had carried for 3 years. One of my warriors searched your cabin, Running Bear said. They found this in your belongings. They found also a woman's dress, a child's toy, buried beneath the floorboards like treasures. Garrett couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. You lost them, Running Bear continued. Your wife, your daughter. The grief drove you to the edge of the world, to a cabin where you could hide from everyone and everything. How? Because I know grief. The chief's voice softened just slightly. I buried my wife 10 winters ago. Buried my son 5 winters after that. Grief is a language I speak fluently. He held out the ribbon. The third test is this. Tell me why you saved my daughter. Tell me the truth, not the noble answer you've been telling yourself. The real reason. The one that lives in the darkest part of your heart. Garrett stared at the ribbon. His daughter's ribbon. The last piece of her he had left. If you lie, Running Bear said, I will know, and you will die. The fire crackled. The elders watched. And Garrett felt something crack open inside him, something he'd kept locked away for 3 years. I saved her, he said slowly, because she has the same name as my daughter. That's not the whole truth. No. Garrett's voice broke. I saved her because I couldn't save them. My wife, my little girl. I held their hands while they died, and there was nothing I could do. Nothing. Tears streamed down his face. He didn't try to stop them. I've been carrying that guilt for 3 years, hating myself for surviving when they didn't, wishing I'd died with them instead of living alone in that cabin. He looked up at Running Bear. And then Morning Star crawled through my door, bleeding, begging not to die alone. And I saw my chance. Not to make up for what I lost. Nothing can make up for that. But to finally do something right. To save someone when I couldn't save the people I loved. His voice dropped to a whisper. I saved your daughter, because saving her might be the only good thing I do with whatever's left of my life. And if I die trying to keep her safe, at least I'll die knowing I did one thing worth remembering. Silence fell over the fire circle. The elders exchanged glances, but Running Bear's eyes never left Garrett's face. The chief was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer, almost kind. Do you love her? The question hit Garrett like a physical blow. I barely know her. That's not what I asked. Garrett opened his mouth to deny it, to explain that love took time, took trust, took all the things he hadn't had a chance to build. But the words wouldn't come. Because somewhere in the past 3 days, something had shifted. Something he hadn't wanted to name. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe. Or maybe I could if I had the chance. Running Bear nodded slowly. He held the ribbon out to Garrett. Take it. Garrett reached out with trembling hands and took the ribbon. He pressed it to his chest, feeling the worn fabric against his heart. The third test is complete, Running Bear announced. He has passed. The elders murmured among themselves, but Garrett barely heard them. His legs finally gave out, and he sank to the ground, clutching the ribbon like a lifeline. He'd done it. Against all odds, against everything that said he should have failed, he'd passed the proving. But even as relief washed over him, he heard a sound that turned his blood to ice. War drums. And then a warrior burst into the circle, his face pale with terror. Iron Wolf! He's taken his warriors and left the camp. They're riding toward the white man's cabin. Running Bear shot to his feet. Morning Star! Garrett was already moving, pushing himself up despite the agony in every muscle. I need a horse, he said. Now. You can barely stand. I need a horse." He grabbed Running Bear's arm, all pretense of protocol forgotten. "He's going to kill her. You know that. You know what he is." The chief's face was torn. For one terrible moment, Garrett thought he would refuse. Then Running Bear nodded to his warriors. "Give him a horse, and give him weapons." He looked at Garrett with something that might have been respect. "You've proven yourself worthy. Now prove yourself a warrior." Garrett caught the rifle they threw to him, climbed onto the horse they brought, and rode into the darkness toward the cabin where Morning Star waited. Toward Iron Wolf. Toward the final battle that would decide everything. The horse beneath Garrett was fast, but not fast enough. Every second felt like an eternity as he pushed the animal harder, racing through the darkness toward the cabin. Iron Wolf had at least an hour's head start, maybe more. And Morning Star was wounded, barely able to walk, completely defenseless against what was coming. If he gets there first, she's dead. Or worse. Garrett forced the thought away and focused on riding. The cold night air cut through his clothes, his exhausted body screaming in protest, but none of that mattered. Nothing mattered except getting there in time. Behind him he heard hoofbeats. Running Bear's warriors following at a distance. The chief had sent 20 men to back him up, but Garrett hadn't waited for them to organize. Every second counted. The cabin came into view just as the first light of dawn touched the horizon. And what Garrett saw made his blood freeze. Smoke. Thick, black smoke rising from somewhere behind the structure. And figures, at least 30 of them, surrounding the building in a loose circle. Iron Wolf had beaten him there. Garrett pulled the horse to a stop at the edge of the tree line, his mind racing. 30 warriors against one man. Impossible odds. If he charged in now, he'd be dead before he reached the door. But if he waited... A scream cut through the air. A woman's scream. Morning Star. Garrett was off his horse before he knew what he was doing. His legs carried him forward, rifle in hand, every instinct screaming that this was suicide. But the scream echoed in his ears, and all he could hear was his daughter calling for him all those years ago while he sat helpless by her bedside. Not again. Never again. He burst from the tree line at a dead run, firing the rifle as he moved. The first shot caught a warrior in the shoulder. The second went wide. Then the rifle was empty, and he was still running, pulling the knife from his belt. The warriors spun to face him. Surprise flashed across their painted faces. They hadn't expected anyone to follow. That surprise bought Garrett 3 precious seconds. He used them well. The first man who came at him took the knife across the throat. The second caught an elbow to the temple that dropped him like a stone. The third managed to raise his tomahawk before Garrett grabbed his wrist, twisted, and drove the blade into his chest. Then they were on him. Fists and feet and weapons coming from every direction. He fought like a man possessed, like the soldier he'd been at Antietam when his unit was overrun, and survival meant becoming something less than human. A club caught him across the back. He stumbled but didn't fall. A knife sliced his arm. He barely felt it. Someone grabbed him from behind. He threw his head back, felt cartilage crunch, heard a scream of pain. But there were too many. No matter how many he hit, more kept coming. They were wearing him down, surrounding him, forcing him to his knees. "Enough!" The voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The warriors froze. Iron Wolf stepped forward, pushing through his men until he stood directly in front of Garrett. Up close, he was even more terrifying, a mountain of muscle and scars, his face twisted with fury. "You should have stayed in the camp, white man. Enjoyed your victory while it lasted." "Where is she?" Garrett spat blood onto the ground. "Where's Morning Star?" "Worried about your prize." Iron Wolf laughed. "Don't worry. She's alive. For now." He gestured, and 2 warriors dragged a figure from behind the cabin. Morning Star. Her hands bound her face, bruised her eyes blazing with defiance, even as she struggled against her captors. "Garrett!" She tried to pull free. "Don't you should have run?" "Shut her up!" Iron Wolf said casually. One of the warriors struck her across the face. Her head snapped back, but she didn't make a sound, didn't give them the satisfaction. Something inside Garrett went very cold. "Let her go," he said quietly. "Or what?" Iron Wolf spread his arms wide. "You're on your knees bleeding, surrounded by my warriors. You have nothing. You are nothing." "I passed the proving." "The proving!" Iron Wolf spat. "An old man's ritual. Meaningless. Power is the only thing that matters in this world, and power flows from strength." He crouched down, bringing his face close to Garrett's. "I have 200 warriors. I saved Running Bear's people from starvation. I can take anything I want, including his daughter." "Then why are you so afraid of me?" The words came out before Garrett could stop them, but they hit their mark. Something flickered in Iron Wolf's eyes. Not fear exactly, but something close. "Afraid?" The war chief laughed, but it sounded forced. "Of a half-dead white man. If you weren't afraid, you wouldn't have run from the camp. You'd have waited for me to fail the third test and taken your prize properly." Garrett held his gaze. "But you didn't wait, because you knew I was going to pass. You knew Running Bear would honor the old laws, and that scared you." Iron Wolf's hand shot out and grabbed Garrett's throat, the same grip as before, the same crushing pressure. "You talk too much. And you don't talk enough." Garrett forced the words out, despite the lack of air. "What are you really afraid of, Iron Wolf? That Morning Star might choose someone else, that she might rather die than be yours." "She doesn't get to choose," Iron Wolf roared. "She was promised to me. She belongs to me. She doesn't belong to anyone." The grip on his throat tightened. Black spots danced at the edge of Garrett's vision. This was it. This was how it ended, strangled to death in front of the woman he'd tried to save. But then a voice rang out across the clearing. "Iron Wolf, release him." The war chief froze. His grip loosened just enough for Garrett to suck in a desperate breath. Chief Running Bear rode into the clearing at the head of his warriors. 20 became 40, became 60 as more riders emerged from the trees. They fanned out surrounding Iron Wolf's men, arrows nocked and ready. "You dare challenge me!" Running Bear's voice was ice. "You dare take my daughter by force!" Iron Wolf released Garrett and stood turning to face the chief. "I take what was promised to me, what your precious proving tried to steal." The proving changed nothing. Morning Star was promised before Garrett Cole ever touched her. That arrangement still stands unless you wish to break it yourself. "Then why are you here?" "Because you took her by force." Running Bear's horse stepped forward, bringing him closer to Iron Wolf. "Because you burned a man's home and attacked him without honor. Because you have shamed yourself and your warriors with this cowardice." The word hit Iron Wolf like a slap. His face contorted with rage. "Cowardice, I saved your people. I kept your children from starving. And this is how you repay me. You saved us, yes. And for that debt I offered you my daughter. But debt does not give you the right to act without honor." Running Bear's voice hardened. "Release her, now, and we will settle this properly." "Settle it how?" "Combat." The word fell between them like a stone. "You against the man who passed the proving. Winner takes Morning Star. Loser accepts defeat." Iron Wolf's eyes snapped to Garrett, who was struggling to his feet despite his injuries. He can barely stand." "Then you have nothing to fear." The trap was elegant, Garrett realized. Running Bear had given Iron Wolf exactly what he wanted, a chance to kill Garrett legitimately. But by framing it as combat rather than execution, the chief had also given Garrett a chance. A small one maybe, but a chance. Iron Wolf must have seen the trap too. His jaw tightened as he weighed his options. "Fine," he said finally. "Combat, here, now." "No." Running Bear shook his head. "At dawn, in the proving grounds, before witnesses. If you kill him in the shadows, some will say you cheated. If you kill him in the light, no one can question your victory." Another trap. By dawn, Garrett would have time to rest, to recover some strength. Not much, but more than he had now. Iron Wolf's hands clenched into fists. He knew he was being maneuvered, but refusing would make him look weak, and looking weak was death for a man whose power came from fear. "Dawn," he agreed through gritted teeth. "At the proving grounds. And when I kill him, Morning Star comes with me. No more delays, no more games." "Agreed." Iron Wolf turned and stalked toward his horse, his warriors falling in behind him. But before he mounted, he looked back at Garrett one more time. "Enjoy your last night, white man. Tomorrow I'm going to tear you apart." Then he was gone, thundering off into the darkness with his war party behind him. The moment they disappeared, Garrett's legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees, gasping every wound, screaming for attention. Morning Star broke free from her captors and ran to him, dropping to her knees beside him. "You fool!" Tears streamed down her face. "You absolute fool! Why did you come back? You could have run. You could have lived. Couldn't let you die." He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "We had a deal. Remember, neither of us dies in that cabin." "This isn't the cabin." "Close enough." She laughed despite the tears, a broken, desperate sound. "You're insane." "Probably." He reached up and touched her face, his bloody fingers leaving streaks across her cheek. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" "Nothing that won't heal." Her hand covered his. "But you, Garrett, you can't fight him. Not tomorrow. Not in any condition." "Don't have a choice." "There's always a choice." "Not for me." He met her eyes. "I told your father the truth in the third test. I said I saved you because saving you might be the only good thing I do with whatever's left of my life. I meant it. If I have to die fighting for you, then at least I die for something that matters." Morning Star stared at him for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. "You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough. I could be anyone. I could be lying about everything." "Are you?" "No." "Then I know enough." They stayed like that for a moment, foreheads touching, breath mingling. Then Running Bear's voice interrupted them. "We need to move. Get him on a horse. He needs rest before dawn." Warriors helped Garrett to his feet and onto a horse. Morning Star rode beside him, close enough that their knees touched. Neither of them spoke, but something had shifted between them. Something unspoken but undeniable. They reached the camp as the first stars faded from the sky. They had maybe 6 hours until dawn. 6 hours for Garrett to rest, recover, and prepare for a fight he couldn't win. But as they lifted him from the horse and carried him to a lodge, he didn't feel afraid. He felt ready. The healer who treated Garrett's wounds was ancient, her face lined with more years than he could count. She worked in silence, cleaning the cuts, stitching the deepest ones, applying poultices that smelled like herbs and smoke. "You're a fool," she said finally, her voice dry as old leaves. "So I've been told." Iron Wolf has killed 20 men in single combat. Warriors. Trained fighters. You're half dead already. "You got a point, old woman." She looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much. "My point is that strength alone won't save you. Iron Wolf is stronger, faster, better trained. If you fight him on his terms, you lose." "Then how do I fight him?" The old woman was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned close. "Iron Wolf's power comes from fear. Everyone fears him. His own men, his enemies, even Running Bear to some extent. But fear is also his weakness." "How so?" "A man who relies on fear becomes afraid of losing it. If you can make him doubt himself, make him angry, make him sloppy, he'll make mistakes." She sat back. "You survived the proving. That's already shaken him. Use that. Get inside his head." Garrett absorbed this. "Anything else?" "Yes." The old woman handed him a small pouch. "Drink this before the fight. It won't make you stronger, but it will help with the pain. And pain makes men slow." He took the pouch. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. She stood and moved toward the entrance. You might still die, but at least now you have a chance. After she left, Morningstar slipped into the lodge. She carried a bowl of something warm broth from the smell and a blanket. You should be resting, she said. Can't sleep. I know the feeling. She sat beside him close enough that he could feel her warmth. I brought you something to eat. You need strength. I need about 6 months of recovery and a small army. Well, I've got broth and a blanket, best I can do. Despite everything, Garrett smiled. It's enough. She watched him eat, her dark eyes tracking every movement. When he finished, she took the bowl and set it aside. I need to tell you something. Okay. If you die tomorrow, her voice caught. If Iron Wolf kills you, I'm not going with him. I'll take a knife from one of the warriors and end it myself before he can touch me. Garrett's heart clenched. Morningstar. No, listen. She grabbed his hand, her grip fierce. I need you to understand. This isn't about you saving me anymore. This is about me choosing my own fate. If I can't have freedom, I'll have death. But I won't have him. Not ever. I'm not going to let that happen. You might not have a choice. Then I'll make one. He pulled her closer, his hand cupping her face. I've spent 3 years waiting to die, hoping for it some nights. But you made me want to live again, and I'll be damned if I let Iron Wolf take that away, from either of us. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Why? Why do you care so much? We're strangers. No, we're not. Not anymore. He brushed the tears away with his thumb. Somewhere in the last few days, you stopped being the woman I saved and started being the woman I'd die for. I don't know when it happened, don't know how, but I know it's true. That's not love. That's desperation. Maybe. Or maybe it's the start of something that could become love if we gave it time. He smiled sadly. Guess we'll find out tomorrow, one way or another. Morningstar stared at him for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative. Two broken people reaching for each other in the darkness. But then something ignited, and the kiss deepened, became something hungry and desperate and real. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. If you survive tomorrow, Morningstar whispered, I'm going to do that again. Then I guess I better survive. She laughed softly, pressing her forehead against his. Get some sleep, Garrett Cole. You've got a monster to kill in the morning. He wanted to argue, wanted to stay awake, to spend every remaining moment with her in case these were the last moments they'd ever have. But exhaustion was dragging him under, pulling him toward the oblivion his body desperately needed. Stay with me, he murmured, just until I fall asleep. I'll stay as long as you need. Her hand found his, their fingers intertwining. And for the first time in 3 years, Garrett Cole fell asleep without dreaming of ghosts. When he woke, the lodge was empty, and gray light filtered through the entrance. Dawn had come. Warriors waited outside to escort him to the proving grounds. They moved in silence, their faces grim. None of them expected him to survive, Garrett realized. They were walking him to his execution, but they were wrong. He thought of Morningstar's kiss, of Running Bear's respect, of the old healer's advice, of everything he'd lost and everything he might still gain. Iron Wolf was bigger, stronger, more experienced, but Garrett Cole had nothing left to lose, and that made him the most dangerous man in the world. The proving grounds opened before him, the same space where he'd stood tied to a post under the burning sun. The same space where he'd refused water and faced his darkest truths. Now it would be the space where either he or Iron Wolf would die. The war chief was already waiting, stripped to the waist, his body gleaming with oil. He held a war club in one hand and a knife in the other. His face was painted for death. Finally, Iron Wolf growled. I've been waiting all night for this." Garrett stepped forward, accepting a knife from one of Running Bear's warriors. He carried nothing else, no club, no shield, just the blade and whatever was left of his battered body. "Let's finish this," he said. Running Bear stepped between them, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "This is sacred combat. The winner claims Morning Star as his right. The loser's life is forfeit." He looked at both men. "Fight with honor, and may the spirits judge truly." He stepped back, and Iron Wolf charged. Iron Wolf hit him like a thunderbolt. Garrett barely had time to raise his knife before the war club came down whistling through the air with killing force. He twisted sideways, felt the wind of the blow pass his face and slashed at Iron Wolf's exposed side. The blade caught flesh. First blood. Iron Wolf roared and spun his backhand swing, nearly taking Garrett's head off. Garrett ducked, rolled, came up with his knife ready. His body screamed in protest, every wound from yesterday, every hour of torture from the proving, all of it demanding he stop, give up, die. He ignored it. "First blood to me," Garrett said, circling slowly. "That must sting." A scratch. Iron Wolf's lips peeled back from his teeth. "I'm going to carve you into pieces." He attacked again, faster this time, the club and knife working in deadly combination. Garrett blocked what he could, dodged what he couldn't, but he was losing ground with every exchange. Iron Wolf was bigger, stronger, fresher. This wasn't a fight Garrett could win by force, so he wouldn't fight by force. "You know what I've been wondering," Garrett said between blows. "Why a man with 200 warriors needs to beat women?" Iron Wolf's rhythm faltered. Just slightly, just enough. "Quiet Dove, wasn't that her name? The one whose legs you broke?" Garrett kept his voice conversational, almost friendly. "Did she beg when you did it? Did she cry?" "Shut up." "And the baby, your own daughter. How does a man drown his own child in a river?" Iron Wolf's face contorted with rage. His attacks became wilder, more powerful, but less controlled. The club swung wide, missing Garrett by inches. "I said shut up." What was she afraid of? What did she see when you held her under? Garrett danced backward, staying just out of reach. "Did she struggle? Did she look up at you through the water with those little eyes?" Iron Wolf screamed and charged, abandoning all technique, all strategy. Pure rage driving him forward like a runaway horse. It was exactly what Garrett had been waiting for. He sidestepped at the last second, letting Iron Wolf's momentum carry him past. As the war chief stumbled, Garrett drove his knife into the back of his thigh, twisting as he pulled it free. Iron Wolf went down on one knee, blood pouring from the wound. The crowd gasped. No one had ever seen Iron Wolf fall. "Get up," Garrett said quietly. "We're not done." Iron Wolf pushed himself to his feet, his face twisted with pain and fury. The leg was bad, Garrett could tell by the way he favored it. But bad wasn't dead, and Iron Wolf was still the most dangerous man he'd ever faced. "I'm going to kill you slowly," the war chief growled. "I'm going to make it last for hours. You can try." They circled each other again, but the dynamic had shifted. Iron Wolf was limping now, his movements slower, more careful. And Garrett, despite his exhaustion, despite his wounds, felt something he hadn't felt since the war. The cold clarity of a man who knows exactly what he has to do. Iron Wolf attacked, but the wounded leg betrayed him. His swing was slower, and Garrett caught his wrist twisted and drove an elbow into his throat. The war chief stumbled back, choking. "Is this what you did to your wives?" Garrett pressed forward, not giving him time to recover. "Hit them when they couldn't fight back. Made yourself feel strong by breaking something weaker." He drove his fist into Iron Wolf's face. Blood sprayed from a split lip. "You're not strong." Another punch. "You're a coward." Another. "You're a bully who never learned that real strength means protecting the weak, not destroying them." Iron Wolf caught Garrett's fist and pulled him close, wrapping his massive arms around him in a crushing bear hug. The air exploded from Garrett's lungs. His ribs creaked under the pressure. Real strength, Iron Wolf hissed in his ear, is taking what you want, and I want you dead. The pressure increased. Garrett felt his vision darkening, his body failing. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't. Morning Star's face flashed in his mind. Her kiss, her tears, her promise to end her own life rather than be Iron Wolf's prize. No, not like this. Garrett drove his forehead into Iron Wolf's nose. Cartilage shattered. The grip loosened. Garrett drove his knee up hard into the wound on Iron Wolf's thigh. The war chief screamed and released him. Garrett staggered back, gasping, his vision swimming. But he forced himself to stay upright, forced himself to keep his knife raised. "You're bleeding," he said between ragged breaths. "You're slowing down, and you're making mistakes. You know what that means." Iron Wolf stood bent over, blood streaming from his nose, his leg barely supporting him. "What? It means you're scared." Garrett smiled grimly. "For the first time in your life, you're fighting someone who isn't afraid of you, and you don't know what to do about it." "I'm not afraid of anything." "Then why are your hands shaking?" Iron Wolf looked down. His hands were trembling, barely visible, but there. Fear or blood loss or both, it didn't matter. What mattered was that he saw it, and seeing it made it worse. "This is over," Garrett said. "Yield now, and you walk away alive. Keep fighting, and only one of us leaves this circle breathing." For a moment, just a moment, something like doubt flickered across Iron Wolf's face. Then it hardened into fury. "I yield to no one." He charged again, putting everything he had left into one final assault. The war club swung in a killing arc aimed at Garrett's skull. But Garrett was already moving. He dropped to his knees as the club whistled overhead, missing by inches. And as Iron Wolf's momentum carried him forward, Garrett drove his knife up into the war chief's chest. The blade sank to the hilt. Iron Wolf stopped. His eyes went wide. He looked down at the knife buried in his body, then up at Garrett's face. "How?" he whispered. "You spent your whole life making people fear you." Garrett pulled the knife free and stepped back. "But fear is a poor shield, and you never learned to fight without it." Iron Wolf's legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees, blood pouring from the wound in his chest. His war club fell from nerveless fingers. "You're nobody," he gasped. "A white man, a stranger. You can't. I'm the man who killed you." Garrett crouched down, meeting Iron Wolf's dimming eyes. "And when people tell this story, they'll say you died crying on your knees, just like the women you murdered." Something like terror crossed Iron Wolf's face. Not fear of death, fear of the legacy Garrett had just promised him. A warrior's worst nightmare. Then the light faded from his eyes, and Iron Wolf fell forward into the dirt. Dead. The proving grounds went silent. 400 people held their breath, staring at the impossible scene before them. Iron Wolf, the undefeatable, the feared, the monster who had terrorized this territory for decades, lay dead at the feet of a half-dead white man. Garrett stood over the body, swaying his knife, still dripping blood. He could feel his own wounds reopening his body, failing. But he forced himself to turn and face Chief Running Bear. "It's done," he said. "I claim Morning Star, not as a prize, not as property, as a woman who deserves to choose her own fate." Running Bear stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly the old chief nodded. "You have earned that right," his voice carried across the crowd. "Morning Star is free to make her own choice. Whatever she decides, my people will honor." The crowd erupted. Some cheered, others shouted in protest, but Running Bear's warriors moved to maintain order. The old chief's word was law, and even those who disagreed dared not challenge it openly. Garrett turned to find Morning Star. She was already running toward him, tears streaming down her face. She hit him hard enough to nearly knock him over, her arms wrapping around him, her face pressing into his chest. "You did it," she sobbed. "You actually did it." "Told you I would." "You're bleeding." "I'm aware. You need a healer. I need you." He pulled back just enough to look at her face. "I meant what I said, Morningstar. You're free now. You can go anywhere, do anything. You don't owe me." She kissed him. It was fiercer than before, more desperate, more real. The kiss of a woman who had just watched the man she was falling for fight a monster for her freedom. The kiss of someone who had stopped running and finally found something worth standing still for. When they broke apart, Garrett was breathing hard for entirely different reasons. "I choose you," Morningstar said. "Not because you saved me. Not because you killed Iron Wolf. Because you're the first person in my life who ever asked what I wanted instead of telling me what I was." "You sure about that? I'm a broke ex-soldier with a burned cabin and enough emotional damage to fill a canyon. I'm a chief's daughter who killed a man, ran away from home, and almost died in a blizzard. I think we match." Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the 100 watching eyes, Garrett laughed. It was a rusty sound, unused for years, but genuine. "Yeah," he said. "I guess we do." Running Bear approached them, his warriors falling in behind him. The old chief's face was unreadable, but his eyes held something Garrett hadn't seen before. Warmth. "You have proven yourself worthy," Running Bear said. "More than worthy. You passed the proving. You killed Iron Wolf. You did what no man has ever done. I had help." Garrett glanced at Morningstar. "She taught me everything I needed to know. She has always been wiser than she lets on." Running Bear's voice softened. "Just like her mother." Father and daughter looked at each other. 3 days ago, Morningstar had been fleeing this man, convinced he'd chosen alliance over her happiness. Now something had shifted between them. Something that might take years to fully heal, but had begun. "Father." Morningstar's voice trembled. "I'm sorry I ran. I should have—" "No." Running Bear raised his hand. "I should not have put you in a position where running was your only option. I was so focused on protecting our people that I forgot to protect my own daughter." Tears spilled down Morningstar's cheeks. "You were doing what you thought was right." "What I thought was right would have destroyed you. That is not leadership. That is failure." The old chief took a deep breath. "I cannot undo what I did. But I can promise you this: from today forward, your life is your own. Your choices are your own. And whoever you choose to spend that life with, I will honor." He looked at Garrett. "Even if it's a stubborn white man who nearly got himself killed fighting a monster twice his size." "To be fair," Garrett said, "he was only about 1.5 times my size." Running Bear's lips twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "You have a home here, Garrett Cole, if you want it. My daughter has chosen you, and I will not stand against her choice." Garrett looked at Morningstar. "What do you want?" "I want to stop running." Her voice was quiet but certain. "I want to wake up tomorrow knowing I don't have to flee. I want to learn who I am when I'm not afraid." "We can do that here. We can do that anywhere, as long as we do it together." Garrett turned back to Running Bear. "Then I guess we're staying, at least for a while." The old chief nodded. "Good. We'll need strong people in the seasons ahead. Iron Wolf's warriors will scatter without their leader, but trouble always finds a way." He paused. "And besides, someone needs to teach my grandchildren how to fight." Morningstar's face went red. "Father, what? I'm old. I'm allowed to think about these things." Running Bear turned and walked away, but not before Garrett caught the ghost of a smile on his weathered face. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of healing and hope. The camp's healers worked on Garrett's wounds, stitching and binding and forcing him to rest despite his protests. Morningstar stayed by his side through all of it, holding his hand when the pain got bad, making him laugh when the darkness crept back in. They talked. For hours at a time they talked. About their pasts, their fears, their dreams. About the people they'd lost and the people they'd become because of those losses. Tell me about Sarah. Morning Star said one night when the fire had burned low and the camp had gone quiet. Garrett's hand went to his chest where the blue ribbon still rested against his heart. She was 8 when she died. Blonde hair, blue eyes, laugh that could fill a room. His voice was rough but not broken, not anymore. She used to chase butterflies through the wheat field, said she was going to catch one and teach it to talk. She sounds beautiful. She was, inside and out. He was quiet for a moment. I blamed myself for a long time. Thought if I'd been stronger, smarter, faster, maybe I could have saved them. Maybe I could have done something different. And now I know the truth. Some things can't be changed. Some losses can't be prevented. All we can do is keep living, keep fighting, and try to honor what we lost by becoming something worthy of their memory. Morning Star's hand found his. I think Sarah would be proud of you. Maybe. Garrett managed a small smile. I hope so, but more than that, I hope she knows I finally figured out what Elizabeth was trying to tell me. She made me promise to keep living. I thought that meant just surviving one day at a time, waiting for the end, but it didn't. What did it mean? It meant finding something worth living for, someone worth fighting for. He turned to face her. It meant you. Morning Star's eyes glistened. Garrett, I spent 3 years running from ghosts, hiding in a cabin at the edge of nowhere, drinking myself to death by inches. Then you showed up bleeding and broken, and more alive than I'd been in years. He cupped her face in his hands. You saved me, Morning Star, not the other way around. You gave me a reason to stop running and start standing. We saved each other. She leaned into his touch. That's what broken people do. They find other broken people and help each other heal. Is that what we are broken? We were. But maybe. She smiled through her tears. Maybe we're becoming something new. Something whole. He kissed her, then soft and slow, with none of the desperation from before. This was a different kind of kiss. The kind that didn't fear tomorrow. The kind that believed in forever. 3 months later, they stood before Running Bear and the assembled tribe. The ceremony was simple. No elaborate rituals, no complicated traditions. Just 2 people making promises to each other before the people who had become their family. I take you as my wife, Garrett said, holding Morning Star's hands in his. Not because of what you give me, but because of who you are. I promise to protect you, respect you, and walk beside you for as long as I live. I take you as my husband, Morning Star replied, her voice steady. Not because you saved me, but because you saw me. The real me. The scared, angry, stubborn woman hiding behind walls I thought no one could break. I promise to challenge you, support you, and love you for as long as I breathe. Running Bear stepped forward, placing his hands on their joined fingers. Before these witnesses, before the spirits of our ancestors, I declare these 2 joined. What they build together, no force will break. What they face together, no enemy will overcome. His voice carried across the crowd. From this day forward, they are one. The tribe cheered. Warriors stamped their feet. Children laughed and pointed. And somewhere in the back, the old healer who had given Garrett the medicine before his fight with Iron Wolf nodded slowly, a knowing smile on her weathered face. That night, as the celebration continued around them, Garrett and Morning Star slipped away to the lodge that had been prepared for them. Inside, a fire burned warm, and everything they needed for a new life waited. So, Morning Star said, leaning against him, what now? Now we live. Garrett pulled the blue ribbon from his shirt and held it up to the firelight. I've been carrying this for 3 years. Couldn't let it go. Couldn't let them go. And now, he looked at the ribbon for a long moment. Then he walked to the small altar in the corner of the lodge, a space Morning Star had prepared with flowers and beads and a single white feather. He placed the ribbon gently on the altar. Now I honor them by living the life they wanted for me, not alone, not running, but here with you building something new. Morningstar moved to stand beside him. We can visit them someday, the Graves. I'd like to meet them, in a way. They'd have liked you. Garrett smiled. Elizabeth would have said you're too good for me. And Sarah. His voice caught. Sarah would have loved having a new mother. We'll tell our children about them. Make sure they know. Our children. If that's what you want. Garrett turned to face his wife. His wife after 3 years of believing he'd never have anything good again. I want everything with you, Morningstar. Every day. Every night. Every moment we can steal from this world. She smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise after the longest night. Then let's get started. Outside, the celebration continued late into the night. Warriors who had once viewed Garrett with suspicion now called him brother. Women who had whispered about Morningstar's rebellion now spoke of her courage with respect. And Running Bear sat by the central fire, watching it all with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had lived long enough to see something beautiful emerge from something broken. The seasons turned. Winter gave way to spring, spring to summer, summer to fall. Garrett learned the ways of Morningstar's people. He hunted with their hunters, built with their builders, learned their language, and their customs, and their stories. In return, he taught them what he knew: how to treat wounds, how to build structures that could withstand winter storms, how to read the land the way soldiers read battlefields. He wasn't just accepted. He became family. And when Morningstar told him she was pregnant on a cool autumn evening with the leaves turning gold, Garrett Cole, the man who had spent 3 years waiting to die, fell to his knees and wept with joy. I thought I'd never have this again, he whispered, his hand on her stomach. I thought this part of my life was over. Nothing is over until we decide it is. Morningstar knelt beside him, her forehead pressed to his. This child will know both worlds, yours and mine. They'll carry both our histories, both our strengths, and both our stubbornness. Definitely both our stubbornness. They laughed together there in the fading light, two people who had found each other against impossible odds. Two people who had been broken and had chosen to become whole together. The next spring, their daughter was born. They named her Elizabeth for the woman who had made Garrett promise to keep living. And they gave her a second name, Morningstar's mother's name, to honor the heritage she would carry forward. When Garrett held his daughter for the first time, he felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Peace. Not the absence of pain. The wounds of his past would never fully heal. But peace nonetheless. The peace that came from knowing he had kept his promise. From knowing Elizabeth and Sarah would have been proud of the man he'd become. From knowing that sometimes the best way to honor the dead was to live fully among the living. That evening, as the sun set over the mountains, and his daughter slept in his arms, and his wife leaned against his shoulder, Garrett Cole looked out at the world he'd almost left behind. Thank you, he whispered, to Elizabeth, to Sarah, to whatever force had guided a wounded woman to his door, on a night when he'd been ready to let the darkness win. Morningstar stirred. Did you say something? Just talking to old friends. He kissed her forehead, telling them I finally understand. Understand what? Garrett smiled, holding his daughter close, feeling his wife's warmth beside him, knowing that the cabin where he'd hidden for 3 years was gone, but something far better had risen in its place. That the best things in life come when you stop running from the pain and start running toward the people worth fighting for. Morningstar's hand found his, their fingers intertwining just as they had on that first night when everything changed. And now? She asked softly. Garrett looked at his family, at the tribe that had become his home, at the future, stretching out before him full of possibility instead of emptiness. Now we live, he said, together. For as long as forever lasts. And they did. Because some stories don't end with death or despair. Some stories end with broken people finding each other, choosing each other, and building something beautiful from the wreckage of everything they'd lost. This was one of those stories, and it was only the beginning. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now for another tale of courage, love, and redemption from the frontier. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support means the world to us and keeps these stories alive.